Oops.
Well, there we go.
I tried clicking on the reveal like 600 times, but I kept missing.
Well, all good. Let's get started. Welcome to week 11, everybody. Casey, it's good to be back. How are you?
I could be better, Jacob. The Bengals, they lose a close one. All the AFC North, the way that the games shook out, didn't really help the Bengals all too much. But we've got a lot of football to talk about this week. Why don't we talk about probably the biggest news that happened right away? We're gonna jump right into the Mac+Jt rundown, and that's Deshaun Watson. Um, Out for the season. That's huge news for the AFC North. The Browns were on trajectory to potentially win the AFC North. At least they were keeping themselves relevant. With the loss of Deshaun Watson, how are we feeling now about the Browns?
I know we're going to get into the future of this Browns offense in a little bit with that Steelers Browns game on Sunday, but when I saw that news this morning about Deshaun Watson having season-ending shoulder surgery, I was relieved. The ESPN moved the Browns' playoff chances down about 20%. The Bengals took a jump along with a bunch of the other teams right there in that fringe wild card range. I think the Browns are absolutely done without Deshaun Watson. We saw how this team looked with PJ Walker in the couple weeks that he missed, but prior to this new shoulder injury when he was still nursing that rotator cuff. And we saw DTR before they decided to move to PJ Walker because he was so bad. And then today they announced that they're going back to Dorian Thompson-Robinson to start this week. I just don't think that anything's going to change from what we saw when he took the reins earlier in the regular season. I think it's going to be pretty ugly. And I think it's perfect time to remind everyone that just a couple weeks before the NFL season started, Josh Dobbs was on the Browns roster. They shipped him off to Arizona for a sixth-round pick because they were going to rock with DTR as their backup quarterback. Obviously, that hasn't worked out great, and Josh Dobbs is killing it now in Minnesota as a starting quarterback up there. Have to wonder if the Browns are regretting that move because I think Dobbs could absolutely keep them afloat in the AFC North with how that defense is playing and how they've been able to run the ball.
Yeah, I mean, even despite that, and I know people aren't super excited about PJ Walker or DTR, I think the everyone can see that this team is built around their defense and running the football. And that the quarterback play, even when it's been bad, they've been able to beat the 49ers. They've been able to score a lot with the Colts game. Like there's a lot of really down bad Browns fans. A lot of Browns that have already just completely tossed the season away, said that they're not going to make it. I'm not ready to do that yet. And I am a staunch Bengals supporter. I just know what this Browns team is capable of, even without Deshaun Watson. And we'll see how they do. I think morale for the players must be at least a little low, but I don't think it should be season ending just yet. And something that we can really all rally behind, CJ Stroud might be the MVP this year. He's played really, really good the last couple weeks. us Ohio State fans, I'm not really an Ohio State fan. I'm really talking about you, Jacob. You guys must be so proud of a Ohio State guy truly getting just the credit they deserve because they are playing outstandingly. CJ Stroud deserves all the credit.
No, it's great to see Ohio State fans have gone through the ringer watching quarterbacks just tear it up in Columbus, get drafted in the first round, and then struggle when they get to their NFL destination. That is just not the case for CJ Stroud. He's been a locomotive with no brakes rolling down the track since he took over in week one in Houston, just has not looked back, looking absolutely stellar. Second in the NFL in yards, 15 touchdowns, just 2 interceptions, the least interceptions by any quarterback that started every game so far this year. He's just been absolutely incredible. And it was a shame that he had to keep that ball rolling, tearing up the Bengals defense this past Sunday. But just the fact that we're having this conversation about CJ Stroud with some of the league's best quarterbacks, and it seems like the fact that he's a rookie is starting to take a back seat. Everyone is just recognizing his numbers, recognizing how great he's been in the NFL so far, and then throwing in at the end, oh yeah, he's also a rookie. Whereas to start, it was he's been so good for a rookie. I think that change over the last couple of weeks has been something big to watch and a big shift in the NFL media for sure. He seems to have Offensive Rookie of the Year already locked up just 10 weeks into the season. So I think turning our focus to the MVP is definitely a reasonable goal.
Yeah, and I know we talked about how they don't have a ton of great weapons, but man, that group, they have really played above expectations and they beat the Bengals without their number one guy, Nico Collins. I mean, Noah Brown played great against the Bengals. It seemed like he's still open. That's the joke. That's the running gag. He's still open. But man, you gotta give CJ credit. He was able to hang in the pocket, make the throws when it matters most, find the open guy just about every single time, and he got the job done in a close win.
The
Congrats
last
to
thing with the Texans that I think is important to point out, everyone loves CJ and he's getting a lot of the recognition, but it's DeMeco Ryan's first year as a head coach. This is just 10 games under his belt as a head coach, I guess he was calling plays in San Francisco, but as the leader of the team and in the head coaching role. And I think he's doing truly a great job. If the Texans win that division, which is what a lot of people are saying is required for CJ Stroud to really get in that MVP talk, I think DeMeco Ryans will probably have Coach of the Year locked up as well in just his first year.
You know what they feel like, and it's not all the way the same. It's definitely different personnel and roster, but it feels very similar to what the Bengals were able to do in their Super Bowl run. They have like this phenomenal Joe Burrow was not rookie, but it was basically his rookie season, and CJ, and then you have just this defense with a bunch of guys that you don't really know of, just absolutely dominate up front, be able to hold the Bengals offense to 27 points. But yeah, I mean congrats to the Texans. I think they've definitely found their franchise guy moving forward. And a team that lost their franchise guy but replaced him with someone else. Josh Dobbs and the Vikings have won 5 straight in a row. I was ready to put them to bed, thinking that they had pretty much lost their season without Justin Jefferson and Kirk Cousins. But man, they just continue to keep proving me wrong time and time again.
In the 7th seed right now in the NFC, if the season ended today, they would be playing playoff football. Obviously, we know Kirk Cousins is not going to come back at any point this season. Even if they were to make a run, he's not with Aaron Rodgers smoking the ayahuasca, doing the Eastern medicine. He's doing it the old-fashioned way, rehabbing that Achilles. So they're going to be with Josh Dobbs the rest of this season, but they are expecting a big boost maybe as soon as this week. Justin Jefferson coming back off the IR. He's been practicing. They opened his window last week, so that's certainly an exciting boost for a Vikings team that's looked incredible the last 5 weeks. They're winning games, and they're playing really good football. And Josh Dobbs doesn't seem to be a guy that's going to make a lot of mistakes. He's running that offense very seamlessly. He's a very smart guy. Everyone knows his story with the NASA internship and stuff like that. And this is the 49ers offense. This is a Kyle Shanahan offense. And I think Josh Dobbs is perfect for it, and he's going to be able to just keep this ball rolling. And as these weapons come back, I think the Vikings offense is going to be pretty scary.
Yeah, and I keep telling people, like, they're in this position even without Justin Jefferson. Like, he's been out. He's not been in this team with this team for like, I want to say 6 weeks now, something like that. I would know because I have him on my fantasy team, or one of my fantasy teams. So I've been counting the weeks for him to come back, counting the days, and I'm looking forward to seeing what that looks like with Josh Dobbs and Justin Jefferson, because this team keeps proving me wrong. They just keep playing really, really well. A team that's not playing well at all, the Patriots. They are pretty much done this season. I think everyone can agree to that. What is their Patriots quarterback situation? I know you wrote that down. I just know Mac Jones is not the answer at the moment.
So Mac Jones, in what might have been one of the worst games that I've ever watched at 8:30 in the morning in Germany between the Colts and the Patriots, Mac Jones, on his last play at quarterback for the Patriots, he threw one of the worst interceptions I've ever seen. A duck that landed 10, maybe even 15 yards in front of Mike Gesicki, who was standing wide open in the end zone. And with one drive left and the clock ticking down, the Patriots certainly could have just left Mac Jones in the game, kneeled it out, or thrown a Hail Mary, but they decided to go to Bailey Zappi for one final drive, seemingly ending Mac Jones' tenure and the hope that he would be the franchise quarterback in New England. And what did Bailey Zappi do? Throws a fake spike deep ball into about 5 Colts players. They pick it off, and the game is over. I think the Patriots have a very unique quarterback situation right now where they have 2 guys of a very similar skill set, and neither of them are any good. So I think the Patriots are probably just going to bounce back and forth between Mac and Zappi for the rest of the year, try to ride the hot hand, maybe win a game or 2, but I think it's full tank mode for the Patriots. You saw some reports come out this week that they're looking to move on from Bill Belichick after this season, and that seems like the perfect time to bring in a new quarterback with the new coach and GM to try to reset that Patriots organization. Some crazy times for an organization that was just so dominant. I know my whole life and yours as well.
Yeah, it's very crazy to see the era of Bill Belichick go down like this. Wonder if he'll call it quits. Wonder if he'll still try to get a coaching gig somewhere. I don't know if maybe it'll be a head coaching job.
I just have a feeling he's gonna coach somewhere else. There's gonna be a brand out there that's very willing to hitch their wagon to the name Bill Belichick. I wouldn't be shocked if a team gave him a GM role as well and let him do the head coach GM thing that's worked so well over the last 25 years or so in New England. I think someone's going to give him another chance. It's just how long does that last, and how long does he want to stay on the sideline, especially somewhere not as comfortable as New England.
Right. And I know we don't have anything planned out for this at all. I'm just very theoretically speaking right now. Bill Belichick, and we all know the Belichick way, very old school, very, I would say rugged, very much in your face, very college-esque. I wonder if he's more fit for the college scene, to be honest with you. Maybe go to an SEC school and just get down to that tough guy sort of business mode. And, you get to make all your decisions. You get to do your own scouting, things of that nature. It's just a thought for him. Probably won't happen. He probably has too much pride to do that, but it's just a thought. Just a weird thought.
I know Nick Saban's still dominating here at Alabama at 72 years old, so that kind of shoots this whole theory in the ankle. But 71 years old, I think, is just way, way too old to dive into SEC football and start coaching, especially after being in the pros for so long. It's such a demanding schedule. Recruiting is a year-long battle, and especially with the way NIL and everything in college football is going right now, I think if Bill Belichick's going to continue coaching, he needs to stay somewhere where he feels comfortable and he really just knows how to win with that setup.
Yeah. Well, it was just a thought. The last thing that we have for our recap, the Buffalo Bills, man, they just can't. They are turning into how I feel about the Chargers, which they just can't win meaningful games. They always make the mistakes that cost them big late down the stretch. The Bills right now are sitting at 5-5, I believe. And I'm ready to call them frauds at the current moment. Jacob, what do you feel about the Buffalo Bills right now?
I couldn't agree more. Josh Allen has 19 touchdowns and 11 interceptions so far this year. I mean, that's just not going to cut it. You can't make that many mistakes. At some point, you're costing your team games. And I know after after that loss on Monday night, the Bills made the move to fire offensive coordinator Ken Dorsey, who just it feels like a year ago was looked at as one of the best coordinators in all of the league. Everyone loved him as soon as Stable moved on to New York, but now obviously that's an open position with Joe Brady taking the interim tag there for the rest of the year. I don't think that was the issue. I think there's a lot bigger issues going on in Buffalo right now, and you see it with some of the tweets coming from Trayvon Diggs, Stefan's brother, after the game about how 14 needs to get out of there and how Josh Allen was always a bum before Stefon Diggs came to town, stuff like that. We've seen some of this blow up on the sideline from Diggs before, smashing iPads, stuff like that. You have to wonder if that's come to a head. Maybe there's some issues in the locker room that we really aren't privy to in the public, and that's come to play a role in why they're not really playing like the Bills team we've come to know over the last couple of years.
Yeah, what's funny that you mentioned the locker room issues. I feel like every time I get after a Bills loss and I get on X.com, I see those fake Instagram post stories where it's always Diggs saying, I told Josh Allen to start throwing to me, and then he starts throwing to the other team, yada, yada, screw this, screw that guy, this, that, and the other. It's weird that it's like that every single time. I don't know who does that. I don't know if it's just like Bills fans that are just mad about the game, so they make that post or whatever, but happens every time. It's always Stephon Diggs hating on Josh Allen and the rest of the team, saying that he's going to quit. Yeah, this is just wild. They got to figure something out for sure.
And their defense is just so injured. Tre'Davious White, Matt Milano already out for the year. That's just not going to get any better, I don't think. I think the Bills are probably done.
Yeah, and that's the tough part about calling them frauds too, because I think if they're fully healthy on defense, that probably gets them another win or two. It's just right now they're hurt, so you can't have the same expectations as everyone else as crown them to be Super Bowl type team or just AFC contenders. They're just not that right now. They're just not. I don't know how.
Maybe it's fair to ask if that healthy defense playing well masked some of these issues from Josh Allen in the past and has been the real reason why the Bills have been at the top of the AFC. Because you see now with teams being able to score, and the Bills, they are not able to overcome those turnovers from Josh Allen.
Right. Yeah, I have a very similar thought to which we'll get into later about the Bengals and their defense, but we're not going to start with them yet. We usually save the Thursday night games for the end of the show. We're actually going to start with Steelers versus the Browns. That is not my pick. I just forgot to hide that. So, boom. Steelers versus the Browns. When I did the research on this line, there was no line because it was the injury. I don't know if that's changed. It says down there at the bottom of the ticker that it's -4 Browns. I don't think that's correct.
It's -1 now. So after Deshaun Watson was out, it moved to -1 for the Browns. I thought that might be a little odd. I expected the Steelers to be favored after DTR was announced the starter, but the Browns keep the point favorite at home against the Steelers this week. And Casey, the only reason I can think that is the line is because this Steelers offense has just been absolutely pitiful. They've been outgamed in every single game so far this year. First team in the history of the NFL to be through Week 10, being outgained in every game and still have a winning record. Every week I feel like I look like the Steelers and say they can't keep this up, but they just keep winning. And maybe this is a formula that's going to work for them. But this offense is just abysmal, Casey.
Yeah, it's funny that you mention it, that they can't continue to do this. Kenny Pickett has been relatively clean. That's something to give a little like. There's a green check. That's a good start. It's a good way to keep a offense moving. Is not turning the ball over. The other thing too is Jaylen Warren seems to really be picking it up now. That run game is kind of finding itself a little bit. I won't say it's all the way there, but I think they're starting to realize that Jaylen Warren deserves half the carries at least, as Najee Harris is still lost out there. I don't know what he's doing. He's just kind of out there. Unfortunate for him. And the addition to Johnson Deontay Johnson has really helped solidify a consistent pass catcher to this team. Even with all those things being said, it's so barbaric. The offense is old style, I would say. It's like if you want to go back to the 90s, this is the traditional offense that you would see. It's a lot of just grinding, running the ball. And to be fair, they probably can't really air it out like they want to. I don't think Kenny Pickett should be their long term answer. Just from what I've seen, there's a lot of just inaccuracies, overthrown balls, indecisiveness. And I think this is their way of masking it. I know people want to go after Matt Canada and his offense, but at the same time, you got to kind of take a step back and realize that this is probably the best way that they can play football because it's so helpful for their defense. It allows them to have long, consistent drives. And the one thing about Kenny Pickett, which is mentioned on our show time and time again, Kenny Pickett in the fourth quarter, he just changes. He's a different quarterback. I don't know what that's about. I don't know why he can't just do that when it matters, or just not when it matters, but do it more consistently throughout the game. But in the fourth quarter, he's a whole different quarterback.
No, you're absolutely right. He's been a touchdown comeback drive machine since he came into the league, and it seems like he can't score in any other way. He has no turnovers in the last 5 games, which is exactly what you're talking about. Keeping that sheet clean, keeping the game close till the fourth quarter when he can turn it on and play the way I guess he only knows how to play in the fourth quarter. But that's the thing with this Pittsburgh Steelers offense is I think they've come to the realization that they can't win games on their own. They're not going to be able to score points and beat teams in an offensive battle. So they just pound the rock. They had 200 rushing yards for the first time in quite some time this past weekend. That's certainly encouraging for an offense that hasn't had over 400 yards in a game in over 3 years. Just a crazy stat during Matt Canada's tenure in Pittsburgh. It's been absolutely terrible. Kenny Pickett, only 14 completions this week. And I know they're not throwing the ball a whole lot, but to continue to have under 200 yards through the air, under 20 or so completions, how do you expect your wide receivers to get going? We talk about how Kenny Pickett doesn't have consistent help on the outside. George Pickens likes to make these spectacular plays. Deontay Johnson starting to assert himself more in the offense. But without giving these guys consistent production, how do you expect them to get comfortable? I think throwing the ball 14 times for under 200 yards is just not a sustainable model in the NFL today, where most teams are throwing the ball more than they're running it. I think they're relying on their defense way too much. It's somehow gotten them to 6-3, but their defense has been their best offensive player. It seems that they need turnovers and short fields and defensive touchdowns in order to stay relevant in games, and they've continued to get that week in and week out. But I just don't know if they're going to be able to keep that up, Casey.
Yeah, I mean, the defense, it, it's 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 weird because I told you I want to hold this stat for later on, but their defense is not great. It's the perception of the Steelers has really warped a lot of people's minds. Really great defense, run the ball, play clean football, hard-nosed football. Their defense is one of the worst in the league in terms of yardage. Now, points per game, they are up there with in the top 10. They just bend but don't break. And a lot of that has to do with the TJ Watt Alex Highsmith combination. I mean, TJ Watt, we all know him, especially in this chat, know that he is a force. He is a consistent game wrecker. And the emergence of Alex Highsmith being the Robin to TJ Watt's Batman has really just made it to where they force the other team to grind. They have to grind and be highly efficient in order to have any sort of success against this team, which they allow that. They allow a lot of underneath stuff. They don't usually allow big plays down the field. And when they do, it's usually because of the busted coverage in the secondary. But that secondary has been getting a little better as time has gone on. I really like the way that it's shaping up for them. They've gotten a little healthier there. But overall, it feels like they can't continue to do this. The 10-plus turnover differential, when you're relying on turnovers in the NFL to have a great defense, it's usually not sustainable.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. These are numbers that we've seen in the history of football not be able to last throughout a full season. And honestly, we've seen these numbers not be able to last through 10 weeks. That's why everything the Steelers keep doing is breaking records that you don't want to break almost across the board every single week. I was expecting that to change this week. I was expecting to be really gung ho on the Browns getting the win and kind of putting the Steelers back down where I think they belong. And bringing their record back down to the way they've really been playing on the field this year. I know a lot of the times we say your record, your record is what it is and you are what your record says you are, but that's just not the case with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Is I think everyone in the entire country recognizes that this team is fraudulent, the definition of fraudulent at 6-3, and there's just no way that they're going to be able to keep this up and make a run. But with the Deshaun Watson news and the way that these other two Cleveland Browns quarterbacks have looked so far this year, I'm not so quick to say the Browns are going to get this job done. This might feel like another low-scoring game where the Steelers just eke it out, and then we're sitting here next Wednesday talking about the 7-3 Pittsburgh Steelers, and that just made me throw up in my mouth a little bit.
I I can't believe that they have a very good chance of going 7-3. That is ridiculous. But the one thing that you have to go back and look at is the Steelers have already played the Browns once, and that was with Deshaun Watson. And I know that was a very crazy game. That's the Nick Chubb game where he gets injured on a very fluky play. That's the game where I believe T.J. Watt returns a fumble for a touchdown, or it was a interception or something like that. Someone returned a touchdown in that game. I can't quite remember who it was. The final score was 22-26, and Deshaun didn't really play all that great. It looks like to me that the Steelers, they will allow you to run on them. Maybe not as much anymore with the return of I want to say Hayward, but that's not right. He returned like 2 weeks ago or a week ago. Can't remember his name. He's a very important player for the Pittsburgh Steelers defensive interior line. But yeah, I think the Browns are not out of this. I really don't. I think that their offensive line has proved enough that they can have a consistent production out of Jerome Ford, Kareem Hunt, and keep themselves in ball games. If we also want to look back at the Pittsburgh Steelers, we want to look at the Browns versus I think the Colts. I think it's the Colts. Yeah, the Colts. B.J. Walker started that game, and they were able to score 39 points. And now I know they had a lot of help from their defense, but that's what's going to have to happen in order for this team to stay relevant. They're going to need a ton of help from their defense, and it is still one of the best units in the league. It's not on that historical pace anymore, but it's still the number one defense in yards allowed, and it's all led by Myles Garrett. And when you have Myles Garrett and you have a guy that is a game wrecker, a guy that comes in when you need him the most, you think of Myles Garrett, and to me, I think this game can really go either way. I think it's going to be an absolute stinker. It's going to be a low-scoring affair, but it's also going to be a bloodbath, an AFC North type bloodbath where there's going to be a lot of just ground and pound, and whoever is the bigger man, I think is going to win. And in terms of just stats, you're looking at the stats, right? I already mentioned the Steelers being like the 28th worst team in the league in yards allowed. Browns are first. And if you're going to give me a yardage type day where field position is at a premium, I'm going to take the Browns.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that for sure. And I think it's kind of funny that we're talking about one team, one offense with a backup third string quarterback and the other with their first round pick quarterback of the future. And we're talking about them very similar ways. These offenses are going to look very similar on Sunday. One with Kenny Pickett, one with DTR, maybe PJ Walker. Casey, you're absolutely right. I know I was definitely going to pick the Browns before Deshaun Watson was out. I don't think a lot has changed. I'm going to rock with Cleveland -1 on Sunday. I just don't believe in this Pittsburgh offense. Sean Connor makes a great point It's not a coincidence Mike Tomlin has 0 losing seasons ever. It's ugly a lot, yes, but old school football, when played efficiently, wins every year. You're absolutely right, but that's just not what we're seeing this year. Casey pointed out that this defense is not really as good as everyone says it is. This team is not the Mike Tomlin teams of old that have been gutting out wins, figuring it out the ugly way. This team is getting beat on the football field, and the numbers on the scoreboard just don't reflect that. It doesn't make any sense. This isn't the Steelers football that Mike Tomlin has built in Pittsburgh over his tenure there. And I think it's going to start to crumble this Sunday.
Yeah, I have to agree. I'm also picking the Browns. I think it's literally going to come down to just grinding it out, field position, and whether or not the game plan for the Browns consists of keeping DTR to a minimum. You have to commit to him being a game manager. You cannot afford for him to be throwing the ball even probably 20 times this game. You have to run, 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 and run some more. You better tell Kareem Hunt, Jerome Ford to rest up, get ready for this game because you're going to get the ball each 20 times. In my opinion, if I'm the coach, if I'm Stefanski, I'm literally going to grind you down until you submit. And that's how they win this game, in my opinion. Hopefully they follow that advice and win themselves a football game because I think they can against the Steelers. Jacob, let's move on to Chargers versus the Packers. I know this isn't a great game, but it's an interesting game nonetheless.
The primetime games this week, the one we're doing after this, Eagles and Chiefs on Monday night, and then Thursday night, obviously, our Bengals against the Ravens are two elite games. But when you have four great teams playing on primetime games, you get a pretty loose Sunday slate, and that's what we have this week. The games on Sunday are few and far between that are between two teams that you actually want to watch. But this one's definitely interesting. The Chargers, whose record is abysmal, 4-5, definitely not where they wanted to be at this point in the season. And the Packers, who have also been underwhelming. Jordan Love, they were hoping he was going to be able to take the reins for Aaron Rodgers and not miss a beat. Well, that certainly hasn't been the case. 3-6 for the Packers, being propped up by that defense that I know we're going to get into here in a little bit. This Chargers offense was definitely encouraging this last week against the Lions. Justin Herbert played so bad in primetime against the Jets, and he bounced back against a pretty bad Lions secondary. But it's still always good to see guys put up numbers when they're supposed to. Justin Herbert had over 300 yards and 4 touchdowns, most of that going to Keenan Allen, 11 catches, 175 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Casey, before we really get into this Chargers offense, I wanted to ask you a quick question. Is Keenan Allen the most underrated receiver in the entire NFL?
I would have said yes a couple years ago because I think people did underrate him. I think people learn the name now. They know Keenan Allen. Maybe he's not in everyone's top 10 list, but he should be. I think he should be. I guess I have to agree with that statement. He is definitely a top 10 receiver in this league. Very underrated, very slept on. He deserves a lot of credit. It's just he doesn't get a lot of help, right? He has games where he has to carry, like just this last week. And with his age right now, he's 31. He's not getting any older. He's had a couple really big, significant, major injuries. It's just a matter of like, can he do this on a consistent basis? You look at his game log, and he has like 2-3 really great games back to back, and then he just disappears against a team that has like no business disappearing to, like the Raiders. He only had 32 yards against the Raiders. Kansas City only had 55. The Bears, he only had 69. But then he just pops off against the Lions, 175 yards. He pops off against the Vikings, 215 yards. Tennessee, 111 yards. It's just a very weird. I think it's a consistency thing with him more than a actual talent issue that people have.
That's certainly fair. Peaks and valleys have definitely been the story of Keenan Allen's career, but this season, he's the only receiver in the entire league with 2 PPR fantasy games over 40 points. I know not everyone plays fantasy, but with numbers like that, that's impressive to hear. There's a lot of elite players in the league. You know, Tyreek Hill, A.J. Brown putting up insane numbers this year. but no one's peaks this year has been as high as Keenan Allen's. He's been absolutely incredible. And you'd expect someone to struggle when you lose your number two weapon in an offense. A lot of times defenses then just turn their focus to one guy, especially, like Casey said, a name as recognizable as Keenan Allen. But he's found a way to just keep eating, and that's what's been able to keep this Chargers offense afloat.
Yeah, the one I do want to say one thing about him. I have him in a couple different fantasy leagues, but the problem with those different leagues that I'm in, I have a three receiver group. I have like a Justin Jefferson, CD Lamb, or something like that, and then Keenan Allen. Or I have Jamar Chase, CD Lamb, and Keenan Allen. And I have never hit Keenan Allen on the days that he's had 40-point games. So it's just been like completely wasted points on my bench. That's just me ranting a little bit about Keenan Allen. But you're right. He definitely deserves more credit. And the fact that he's doing it without a solid number two, Mike Williams isn't there right now. He's been out for, I think, the whole season for the most part. It's very, very commendable for him that he's been able to do what he's been able to do in those conditions. Now, I know we don't have it necessarily written down here, but oh yeah, you do. You have Quentin Johnston sighting. We've been waiting on a receiver two or just a second target for Herbert in the Chargers to emerge from this team. What did Quentin Johnston do that you feel like? I mean, did he have a great game? I haven't.
He
Really...
scored a touchdown. So at least we saw him do something. It was in the red zone. He had 4 catches on all 4 of his targets, and he got into the end zone for the first time in his NFL career. Obviously, that's not what you want out of your first-round pick receiver, especially when the guy ahead of him, the guy he was drafted to replace in the future, goes down so early in the season. He just hasn't been anywhere. He hasn't even been on the field not getting targets or getting targets. He's been standing on the sideline, helmet in hand, almost the entire season. That 34 yards is his second highest yardage total so far this year. 4 catches, his second highest as well. I was just excited to see him on the field. We saw him be such an electric receiver at TCU, such an exciting prospect with that, big 6'4", 215-pound frame. And he just hasn't been able to produce at all in the league. 18 catches for 162 yards. That's basically what Keenan Allen had this past weekend. That's what Quentin Johnston has on the season. And that was his first touchdown on Sunday. Just such an underwhelming player. And I was just hoping that touchdown there at the end of the game can get him rolling a little bit.
Yeah, I just looked up his stats. 18 receptions, 28 targets, 162 yards, 1 touchdown, his longest 20 on the season. You definitely expect more from your first round pick. At the current moment, looking like a bust. I'm not ready to say that yet for any first round guy, their first season, their rookie season. But not a good look for the Chargers. I mean, the game still proved last week that they don't have a number 2 guy. They have Austin Eckler. He was their second leading receiver with 4 receptions, 48 yards. It's just not going to cut it, man. It's just not going to cut it. They have to have someone emerge. And I think at this point in the season, you're probably not going to have that. You're probably not going to find someone in your roster, if they haven't already, to emerge. So they're going to be having that issue, that hole to deal with, probably for the remainder of the season. And it doesn't help that Austin Eckler is just being keyed on. I mean, he only had 3.5 yards a carry this last game. And he's really, if you look at it, he's not really produced a whole lot since week 1. He's been below 4 yards a carry, actually 3.5 yards a carry for weeks now at this point.
Yeah, and he was banged up earlier in the season, missed a few games. Josh Kelly came in, couldn't do anything running the football, and Eckler comes back and he continues to struggle a little bit. The last 2 seasons of 20-plus touchdowns, obviously, is not going to come. That trend is not going to continue this year for Austin Eckler. He's not going to reach that 20-touchdown mark for the 3rd year in a row, and he's also not going to reach that yardage mark that he's put up in the last couple of years. He's been competing for the total yard leader of any running back in the entire NFL, and that's just not going to be the case again this year. He's been incredibly inefficient, and you have to wonder if he's still banged up. Maybe this Chargers offense can take a step if he continues to get healthy. Maybe he can can look like himself of these last couple years. But yeah, this Chargers offense just isn't really what we expected it to be this year. Even though they just had a pretty good game against a bad Lions defense, I wouldn't change your opinions on the Chargers too much just yet.
Right. And not to mention that the Chargers themselves, they don't get much help from their defense, which when you get down and you're asking your offense, who's kind of struggling a little bit, to start coming back, it doesn't help. You have written down here they allowed a 300 passing day from a quarterback and a 200-yard rushing day, 40 points in total. Yeah, it doesn't get much worse than that, Jacob. It doesn't get much worse than that. Like I said, there's something about this defense that is undisciplined. They can't make plays when they need to. They've got guys, they've got names like Khalil Mack,
Right.
Bosa, Derwin James. They had, they just traded away that corner, J.C. Jackson, I believe. Um, they've had guys, but with very little success. What do you make of this Chargers defense?
That might be the most infuriating point about maybe any unit in the entire NFL. The recognizable names on this Chargers defense make how bad they've been this year perplexing. There's no reason that they should be allowing this many points, this many yards on this consistent of a basis. Behind the Pittsburgh Steelers, they're spending more money on the defensive side of the football than anyone in the entire NFL. So for them to continue to be this bad, it's just completely surprising. Derwin James has been the one bright spot. He's probably the best safety in the league, and he has been since he came in. He flies around the field, involved in absolutely everything. 13 tackles on Sunday. And this defense was on the field for almost 40 minutes on Sunday, and he played all but 3 snaps. Just absolutely incredible leadership from the safety position, and he flies sideline to sideline, hash to hash, making plays everywhere. But he can't do it alone. The pass rush seems to have disappeared. Joey Bosa, I know he was banged up earlier in the year. He has not gotten back to himself yet. And Khalil Mack, when you look at the numbers, they look pretty good, but it's just not telling the true story. Khalil Mack had 6 sacks in week 4 against the Raiders. He has just 3 since then, and 2 of them came against the Jets, and we all know what the Jets O-line has turned into at this point in the year. They just can't produce at any of the 3 levels on the defensive side of the football, and they're asking way too much out of their offense, who, like we said, is missing a lot of weapons.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of the point about the Chargers is that they just beat up on really bad teams, especially on defense. Seems like their offense maybe plays down to their opponent quite often, or plays up one way or the other. But the defense, man, when they play a really good offense, when they played someone that is able to have a balanced attack, they were 30, basically 50% rushing, 50% throwing against the Lions, and they couldn't stop nothing. And those numbers too, they have a really good sack total number. A lot of those guys do, but they're all coming off of really big days, right? Where they just dominated that day. They just can't seem to put it together for multiple game stretches or against good opponents. And it's tough to see because I do think that there's a lot of good names on this team, a lot of high profile characters, and they just can't get it done. I don't know if it's coaching. I don't know if it has to be coaching at some point, right? 500 yards and 40 points. I feel like part of that's coaching, part of that's player performance. But when you're consistently inconsistent, that has to be on the coaching.
Brandon Staley, everyone likes to point to the timeout usage, the poor clock management, some play calling on offense. He's the defensive guy. There is no reason why this defense is this bad. He's been there for plenty of time to get his guys in there, to get his system in there, and it just has never gotten better. I think Brandon Staley's time is done in Los Angeles unless a miracle can happen and they can go on a win streak, turn this around, and make the playoffs. But I would expect Brandon Staley to be out of there after this season. But Casey, this defense doesn't exactly have a huge challenge this weekend. They're going to Green Bay to play the Packers, and that Packers offense has struggled this year.
Yeah, when you think of the bad offenses around the league, I don't usually think of the Packers just because of the history there with Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers, but they're up there, or I guess down there, with some of the worst offenses in the entire league. And it's a shame, really, because I had a lot of faith in this team based off of their defense, and they have a very good defense. They have actually held opponents, I think they're 11th in points per game. They're like up in the top 10 in yards allowed per game. They're doing what they're supposed to do. Their defense is phenomenal. Their offense, I believe, might be the lowest in points scored, or in the top or in the bottom five of that category. They just can't put points together. They can't put yards together. It really starts with the quarterback play. It's not been the greatest this season. I mean, the accuracy is a huge issue for Jordan Love. He's only completing 58.7% of his throws. He's not protecting the ball. It's not good for that team right now. Part of it also has to do with there not being a true number one receiver there. Jaden Reed, their rookie, currently leads that team with 400 something yards, 4 touchdowns. Romeo Dobbs, who we know is more of a 2 or a 3, has 300 yards and 6 touchdowns on the year. They just don't really have a whole lot of help for Jordan Love, and the fact that Jordan Love is probably not the guy amplifies that problem even more. This team really struggles right now, but on top of that too, you have written down here Aaron Jones, AJ Dillon. They're not who they are anymore. They're not the same guys anymore. I think it's also because their offensive line has been banged up. They're just in a really bad year, a down year for that team overall, especially on the offensive side.
Yeah, the offensive line injuries certainly a big deal. It needs to be talked about. David Bakhtiari missing his second full season in a row, and we know what he is on the left side of that O line, one of the best tackles in the entire league. Jordan Love just hasn't been what they wanted him to be. He has some arm talent. He's made some really good throws, some really impressive drives, but it's just not consistent enough. And there's some guys that are like that in the NFL. You know, you see flashes, they just don't have all of what it takes to be an NFL quarterback. And I think that's the category Jordan Love falls into. We thought maybe he would have an easy transition into the league because of what we know or what we thought we knew about A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones, but combining for just 600 yards so far this year, those two have not been the prolific backfield pair that we came to know with Aaron Rodgers at the helm of that offense. And like you said, Jaden Reed leading the team in receiving. That's obviously a surprise. You took Christian Watson so early in the draft last year. He showed great flashes during his rookie season as a true deep threat, and he just hasn't done anything consistently this year. His big games have been two catches, 40 yards or so for touchdowns. He's turned out what seems to be to me like a Gabe Davis type season where it's shot plays only, one here, one there, sprinkled throughout, and an inability to give you consistent production from the wide receiver position. And that's just made this so difficult for Jordan Love. But I guess one thing to point out is Romeo Dobbs, even though he is not having a great year in the yardage department, just about 250 total yards on the year, he has 6 touchdowns. Like Casey said earlier, 6 touchdowns, tied for fourth in the entire NFL. I know Romeo Dobbs, not a name that we expected to be at the top of any of those lists. But yeah, this Packers offense, just not a whole lot to get excited about. Maybe they can turn it around against, like we said, an abysmal Chargers defense, but one of these two are going to have to, find water here in this game. It's the opposite of an unstoppable force and an immovable object.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know I touched on their defense just a little bit, but it truly is statistically really good, especially with a struggling offense. I mean, you look at their defensive line, Rashawn Gary, Devontae Wyatt, Kenny Clark, Preston Smith, those four have been not excellent, but they've been good, and they've kept their team in games. Jair Alexander having a down year mainly because of injury. If he's staying healthy, if he's not banged up this year, who knows? Maybe this defense is a lot better than even the top 10. They're just solid all around, and it's just a shame that the Packers offense is really just holding them back this year. The Chargers, I think, are favored by 3 points, Jacob. I'm probably going to be taking the Chargers in this one. I don't have a lot of faith in the Chargers, but I really don't have any faith in the Packers offense, and I think that they can probably the Chargers defense can probably have a field day on the Packers offense and how inefficient it is. I'll go with the Chargers -3.
I'm going to go with the Chargers as well, and you said it perfectly there. It's just which quarterback, which offense do I have more faith in? I love the Packers defense, like you said, studs on all three levels and really playing good football right now. But at the end of the day, I don't want to put my faith in Jordan Love and in those receivers and in those running backs who are all three having a down year and an O-line that continues to struggle. I'm going to take Justin Herbert, who has looked really good. And I know it's never Justin Herbert's fault, but these last couple of weeks, excluding that New York Jets primetime game, really haven't been Justin Herbert's fault. He's playing some good football. He's finding open receivers. The defense is just letting him down. I think they're going to be able to hold that Packers offense at bay, and the Chargers get the job done.
Yep, I have to agree. And I think part of I know Sean just mentioned that Chargers are second worst in the NFL in yards allowed. Now, I think we both agree that the Chargers defense has really let down this team as well. But in terms of what do you think is worse, Packers offense, Chargers defense, I'll probably generally lean towards the guys that are more highly prolific, like the Joey Bosa's, Khalil Max, Derwin James, Asante Samuel Jr., which we didn't even really touch on either. I think those guys I would probably lean towards more than the other way around. But
Yeah, you're
past
absolutely right.
but past that, we're moving on to the really good games, the really, really high profile games. And again, those are not our picks. Sorry about that. Those are not our picks. But Eagles versus the Chiefs. Philadelphia is favored by 2.5. Jacob, why don't you start us off? What do you think about this Eagles Chiefs Super Bowl rematch?
Oh, I think it's great. I think it's a Super Bowl rematch, obviously. I think it might be a Super Bowl preview. These two teams playing as good as anybody in the league. Just a great game here on Monday Night Football, and it seems like we haven't had a great Monday night game in some time. So this is a breath of fresh air for football fans everywhere.
Yeah, I cannot wait for this matchup. I think that we'll see a really, really good game. I think there's going to be a lot of chippiness. I think there's going to be a little revenge, maybe. I know I would never, ever use excuses because I'm not an excuse guy, but there was a lot of turf issues in the Super Bowl. Wouldn't allow the Eagles to really get after the quarterback as much. And now the Chiefs' offensive line is not as good as it was last year. So I don't know. I smell a bit of a revenge game, but I won't go too deep into the Chiefs just yet. The Eagles' offense, you have it written down there. They needed to buy. Can Hurts get healthy? Because when Hurts is healthy and playing to his best potential, he's MVP of this league, hands down. And it's not even really close, in my opinion. You look at the yardage, you look at the touchdowns, you look at just all the numbers. He's really turned around the turnover issues. I think he could definitely lead that charge in the MVP conversation. But it helps to have a guy like AJ Brown. AJ Brown is either leading or is second in yards this season. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, I believe he's still behind Tyreek Hill, but those two are in a league of their own when it comes to receiving yards this year.
Yeah, and also too, Hurts is a quarter of what their rushing attack is. And if you think about if you had 1,000 yards and a quarter of that, 250 yards on the season, I mean, they will get like 3,000 yards or pretty darn close to that on the year in terms of rushing, and yeah, it's just a lot of great play from Hurts and their running back, who currently, if I remember correctly, it's not. Is it Swift? Is Swift getting majority of the carries? Yeah,
Yep,
Swift.
DeAndre Swift. Kenneth Gainwell fumbled one time about 2 weeks ago, and he has not seen meaningful carries since then. DeAndre Swift, really the only running back getting the meaningful touches in Philadelphia right now.
Yeah, and he's got 600 yards on the year. I mean, they're just rolling, man. And the fact that the Chiefs on defense, they're a little banged up right now, I think plays into their favor. The fact that they're hurting and without some linebackers, will really be very prevalent in this game. I think Nick Bolton was a huge underrated factor in the Super Bowl. And, you know, the fact that the offensive line is also, for the Eagles, is getting much healthier and getting to their all pro form in terms of being able to protect Hurts, in terms of getting push, the fact that they have the unstoppable tush push. I really like the Eagles offense versus this Chiefs defense going into this game.
Yeah, like you said to start off there, the bye was so crucial for this Eagles offense. We saw Jalen Hurts the last couple of weeks limping on and off the field, not using his legs as much off schedule, running on pass plays, really only using his legs in those design run situations. And if he was able to get healthy in these 7 off days, then I think this Eagles team is just going to get even better and even scarier and get just closer to that dominant form that we saw in the regular season last year when they were just steamrolling absolutely everybody. And that might start on Monday night. If they can go into Arrowhead and beat the Chiefs and avenge that Super Bowl loss, then I think the Eagles take the number one spot in everyone's power rankings in what would be probably the biggest win of the entire season. Like you said, A.J. Brown, he's probably going to have just another big day. And that seems to be just a fair bet when it comes to talking about him. In 4 of his last 5 games, he has over 125 receiving yards, just unbelievable numbers and production out of him. They definitely are not mad at all about trading a first round pick for a wide receiver and then re-signing him to that mega deal. He has been everything that they've wanted out of a superstar added into that offense. And like you said, another trade they made this offseason, DeAndre Swift, since he's taken over as the lead back, he's changed that offense immensely. The ability that he gives them to be a pass catcher out of the backfield as well as what he does on the ground with his legs is great. He's a true dual threat back that gives you a real rushing and receiving threat, and he's been a big boost to that offense, something that they were really missing last year with Miles Sanders. And I think, like I said, if Hurts can get healthy and that defense can get healthy, I think we're just going to see the dominant Eagles of last year again down the stretch this season.
Yeah, and we talked about how we thought that they were maybe a step behind. Well, last couple of weeks they've really come into their own. They really started looking like the dominant Eagles offense that we come to have expected from them. The Eagles defense also has kind of come into their own as of late as well. They just have great depth on their D line. I talked about how the 49ers unfair defense, right? Right behind them is the Eagles. Their defensive line, I'm not going to list all the guys, but there's 8 guys in there that even Bengals fans would be glad to have starting for them and or in their rotation. And it's just phenomenal defensive line. The one thing I have a question to you about, because I haven't really been able to pay attention much to it, the Kevin Byard situation. They traded for Kevin Byard. I think it was a 5th round pick from the Titans. They tried to solidify that secondary. At the current moment, with the secondary getting healthier, it does look like it's made maybe a small difference, but I don't know if it's made a big difference, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, he's only played 2 games for the Eagles so far with the bye last week, so I think he might still be getting his feet wet in the system. We know Kevin Byard, all pro safety with the Titans. I think once he really gets comfortable there in Philadelphia, he'll be just fine. But in those 2 weeks, he was top 5 in tackles on the defense. So I know that's sometimes a misleading stat for a safety, but you like to see him getting involved. You like to see him in the mix. I'm certainly not worried about Kevin Byard. You'd like to see more out of a guy with a name that recognizable right off the rip. But yeah, like I said, I think it's just going to take time. And once he gets more comfortable in that defensive system, which is not an easy one, it's a very complicated defense there in Philadelphia. I think he's going to be just fine. He's going to be exactly what they need in the secondary.
Yeah, and luckily for that secondary, they're going up against the Chiefs offense, and that set of receivers have not played great. Patrick Mahomes still as efficient as ever, but not having the guy that can stretch the field in Tyreek Hill, the guy that isn't sure-handed as much as Juju Smith-Schuster, they have really taken a step back. Now, Rashee Rice has looked like he can maybe make a name for himself. I don't think he's some all-star. I don't think he's probably even the number one receiver, but he's been getting significant looks. He's been getting a lot of targets. not Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelsey. He's still a Hall of Fame type caliber tight end, and plays really great when Taylor Swift's in town. Doesn't play great when she's not in town. So that's just a weird stat to bring up. But the offense has not played nearly as great as it has in previous years. Offensive line, the tackles have been not great this year. They're not able to give Mahomes as much time as they were last year. The receivers aren't getting open as quickly. They're still able to run the ball effectively to a degree, but not nearly as well as they were last year. I don't know, man. I don't like the matchup between the Chiefs offense and the Eagles defense on a field that it won't be super slick. I think that's going to be a key factor in this game. Be interesting to watch how that plays out. But the one thing that has really changed for this Chiefs team in general, and why they're still winning ball games, that defense, it just it went from being one of the bottom or maybe average defenses in the league to like a top five out of nowhere. And it's really because of the emergence of Trent McDuffie and, just him being a shutdown corner, them having some all pro type play from their linebackers who are currently hurt. But that and Chris Jones still being a Hall of Fame type defensive tackle has really made this defense really, really good this year.
And George Karlaftis. We talk about the importance of having an edge rusher that's consistently getting pressure on the quarterback. Karlaftis, 6 sacks already this year, just his second year in the NFL out of Purdue. He's been incredible for them. A guy I really wanted on the Bengals in that draft cycle, and he goes one pick before to the Chiefs, and he's absolutely dominating out there. That seems to be, with a lot of other things, obviously, one of the big missing links to that team. Chris Jones was forced to rush the passer almost exclusively by himself the last couple years. Now having those other guys with big sack numbers, that definitely takes a lot of weight off his shoulders and lets him just, play football the way he knows how to play football. And obviously that's at an incredibly high level. But outside of Chris Jones, they have another guy who's at the top of his position group, Trent McDuffie, one of the best corners in the league. And he's so young, so versatile, plays both inside and outside. He's been incredible this year. I know there was a lot of questions about his size when he was coming out of Washington, but he has certainly found his groove in Kansas City in that Steve Spagnuolo defense, and he's playing out of his mind.
Right. I have to agree. I was really wanting Karlaftis too. I know one of the viewers here lure up my father. He and I were all over George Karlaftis. We wanted him really badly. Now, Dax Hill's played great. I can't be too upset with that, but it was a bit of a snipe. If you ask me, it was a bit of a snipe, but that brings us to the pick. I think you already know where I'm leaning towards, Jacob. I think the Eagles. I really like the matchup. I just think that it's a different game. Their Chiefs are just a little bit worse on offense this year. I think that defense is going to have an easier time stopping them, and I think that the Eagles defense. Will be able to handle the Chiefs offense. I think the Eagles offense it's just too dynamic for what the Chiefs want to try to do.
Yeah, no, I'm going to take the Eagles as well. I was somewhat expecting the Eagles to be favored in this game. The Chiefs have not looked like they've been able to put a full game together on both sides of the ball yet this year, but it is in Arrowhead. They still have Patrick Mahomes. They still have Andy Reid. 2.5 points. I think that's a very reasonable spread. I'm not looking into this line at all, but I love the Eagles and I love getting points betting on the best record in the NFL. So it's hard to turn that down whenever that opportunity arises.
Yeah, I have to agree. Be interested to see what the public thinks of that. Only time will tell. We'll see what that ends up being. Last game. Everyone's been waiting on this one. The Bengals versus the Ravens. Thursday Night Football. Baltimore is favored by 4 points. Jacob, what are your initial thoughts going into this game?
My initial thoughts are must win, but I want to roll that back a little bit for the Cincinnati Bengals. I think this is obviously a massive game. If you win it, you're right back in the thick of it in the AFC North and the AFC playoff chase. And if you lose, you fall to 500 and further back in both the division and wild card hunt. Definitely not a whole lot of room for error for this Bengals team after the slow start. And the Ravens have looked great, excluding the last couple quarters of last week's game. They've been on an absolute tear, looking like one of the best teams in the league. So definitely no easy game tomorrow, a big challenge for the Bengals. And I think this game is for the division. I think the winner of this game takes a stranglehold on the division. And like we talked about in the Browns and the Steelers game, with the way that Steelers offense has looked and the Browns losing Deshaun Watson, I just do not expect either of those teams to be able to keep pace down the stretch this season. So this game here, setting the tone for the rest of the season. The Bengals picking up a crucial win in the AFC as a whole, in the AFC North for sure. I mean, it couldn't get any bigger than tomorrow night, Casey.
Yeah, and you fall 0-3 in your division. It's just so hard to expect to come back from that, and you wouldn't have the tiebreaker with the Ravens anymore at that point. It just wouldn't be a good situation if they dropped this one. I feel like it is a must-win game in terms of the AFC North. I still think, if you go 5-5, that is a really tough schedule stretch to even really consider the playoffs. So I really do think this is must win. I know you just explained why you don't think that is the case, but do you really expect a team that's you've seen for the first 10 weeks now, or 11 weeks, however you want to look at it, to go, what would that be? 5-5. So they would have to go 7 games in a row and win just to be 12-5. I don't know if they can go 5-2 to make it an even 10-7. That's just a really tough ask, especially when you
And
have
with a
the
loss, you'd also be sitting at 1-5 in conference, which
yeah.
gives you a very hard uphill battle for any of the three wildcard spots. You would not have the tiebreaker over anyone. And sitting at 5-5, like Casey said, you'd have to go 5-2 the rest of the way just to get to that 10-win mark, which I think is kind of unanimously looked at the get-in price for the AFC playoffs. I think you just talked me into it right there. Yeah, this is a must-win, Casey, and the Bengals have to look like they looked when they script plays. We came out this last week with a scripted drive and marched right down the field, passing the ball to any and everybody. And Joe Burrow looked great, and everyone was involved, and a touchdown right away, and stadium goes crazy. And then for the next 2 quarters and change, nothing. The offense just goes into hibernation. I'm not sure whether that's a play calling issue, whether that's a locker room player issue, but it needs to be fixed because that model is not one that's going to work, and that's not one that's going to win games.
Yeah, I think part of the reason, and I've heard enough press conferences from Zach Taylor to know that they love to see how teams are going to play them. They love to know how they're going to be played against. And when we go down there and score right away, it appears that our game plan is going to work, right? That we're going to trust in this game plan. They go out on that second drive, and a lot of the time, unfortunately, they only get like maybe 3 and out, maybe 5 plays, 6 plays. They don't get a whole lot of plays to work with to really, finally realize that this is probably not going to work. And then they waste the second drive. They go to the third drive and, they put something together. It doesn't necessarily work out. And then after that, they're like, okay, we got to change something. And at that point, you don't know where you're at. You could be behind by 2 scores. You could be up by a score, just like we were against the Texans, or tied. It just it's so inconsistent. I think, honestly, I do think that maybe the scripted plays, if we don't score on that second drive, if we don't get up by 2 scores, this offense just doesn't function the way that it wants to. It wants to be up. It wants to be ahead of the game. It wants to be in the driver's seat. It wants to be in control. And when it's not, it really struggles. It really struggles. And it takes a while before we find something that works out, usually without a structured play. And when that happens, we see Joe Cook, we see Jamar get out in open space, find that touchdown across the middle. Sometimes it takes Tyler Boyd just crazy catch and run. Um, the Bengals offense is just very much up and down, though. Like you said, it needs to figure itself out. It needs to be more consistent. And the offensive line, the thing that we thought was most improved, yes, the sack total numbers have gone down, but the pressure is still as high as it's ever been. Um, I mentioned this after the show today. It always feels like, at least this year, that it's not like necessarily one guy that's having a bad season. Yes, you can look at Cordell Wilson. He's not had a great year, but Karras had a really bad couple games. Kappa has had really bad games. Um, I would say Orlando Brown Jr. has had some really bad games. They're never like, it's never just one guy, right? And it always happens at the worst time where they can't all be consistent. And when they're all consistent, you look at the 49ers game. I mean, they still gave up a couple sacks, but they were still very efficient in that game. They were able to move the ball, run the ball. It just seems like they have a problem with consistency. They can't all play a great game at once, and they can't do it for long stretches at a time. I don't know how that changes. I don't know what you got to do in order to fix that. But it's going to be very tough to do that against a Baltimore team, especially without T. Higgins, especially without Yoshi. You're losing depth there. We don't know about Charlie Jones yet. It's going to be a tough one for the Bengals on offense.
Yeah, the offensive line has definitely been the low point for this team so far this year. Just such a letdown after we thought the problem was fixed this offseason. We spent a lot of money on Orlando Brown, and we spent a lot of money the offseason past on Karras and Kappa, and it really thought this group was going to come together and really change things in Cincinnati on the offensive line, and that just hasn't been what's happened. That hasn't been the reality of the situation. But you got to hope that they're going to get better right about now, right about this, week 9, week 10, week 11 point in the season last year is when the Bengals flipped the switch. We were 5-4 too, and then we decided to just go on a tear and win all but one game the rest of the year, and just absolutely incredible end of the year, and the O-line looked great the rest of the way. Maybe that's what happens starting tomorrow. I'm a little bit worried about how this offensive line is going to look against a prolific Ravens pass rush attack. Sorry. That we know that they're one of the best in the whole league at getting after the quarterback. I know we're going to get into here in a little bit, but first, the Bengals defense. Are we worried after this last week? Such an abysmal game. Devin Singletary, 30 carries, 150 rushing yards. Noah Brown, well over 150 yards through the air. He's still open, as Casey said in the pre-show. And just a horrible Sunday. Can't have any more of that against the Ravens offense. They have guys too, and if they can get open and make something happen, this game will get ugly.
Right. I mean, it's going to take a full effort from this team, especially on defense, in order to contain Lamar and that offense. I mean, it's been shown now time and time again, and I know we had 2 great week stretch here where we were able to contain the run, play great defense, but we still gave up quite a bit of yards to the Bills, to the 49ers. Funny stat, because I didn't want to bring this up during the Steelers talk. But you look at the Steelers defense, who we love to crown as this great defense. The Bengals are literally the exact same team, almost from top to bottom. The only difference is they don't have a TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith. We have a Trey Hendrickson, DJ Reader, Sam Hubbard combination that has really worked out this season. Literally just like a couple teams back from having given up the most yards on defense. I think we're sitting at like 28 and the Steelers are at like 26. Steelers giving up 370 something yards per game. Bengals 380 something per game. Turnover differential, the exact same. Plus 10 on either side. We both really can create turnovers. Same with the sack numbers and the pressure numbers. They're all relatively very much the same. It's very strange that we're even in this position where we're so worried about what the Ravens will do on offense that we have this mentality of bend don't break, bend don't break. The offense for the Ravens, they seem to really make us break at the worst moments. They are so efficient that they can grind us down and make us pay. They do the exact same thing with the Steelers. Um, the Steelers, however, they find the way to create the turnovers, and that's what it's going to take for this Bengals team to be able to beat the Ravens. They have to win the turnover battle. Last time, the Bengals gave up one interception, and that was the difference between the ball game. Was that one interception, that one less possession, that one drive that ended in the red zone without points cost the Bengals the game inevitably down the road. They cannot afford to turn the ball over, and they cannot afford to not get turnovers this game. If they can't get turnovers this game, they're not going to give themselves an advantage in this game whatsoever. And luckily for them, it's not like the Ravens are some great offense that protects the ball. They're just really good at running the ball. I think they have troubles passing the ball. Trey Hendrickson is playing this game, which is great. I don't know how he's going to be able to play this game with that hyperextended knee, but apparently he didn't even have an injury on the injury report. He was undesignated, I think is what the term is. But
no injury designation for today, and I guess going into tomorrow. So yeah, he's good to go as if nothing ever happened, which is just absolutely crazy. After watching that clip, Noah Brown flying into his knee, that looked ugly. I was in the stadium, and I certainly thought that his season was over, hobbling off to the sideline. So those practice clips yesterday were an incredible feeling going into tomorrow night.
Absolutely. And I forgot we were both in the stadium for the Texans game. We were both. I was in the suite, the Betfred suite, and you were at 135. That's the end zone that's closest to the river, I believe.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, those are my family season tickets. Been there about my whole life. So every time I get a chance to go back, it's always good to see the good people in my section. It's the great thing about being a season ticket holder.
Absolutely. And my section usually when I pick seats, I know I'm getting a little off topic here. I sit in the other end. I sit in the 200 section with some family. I think one of my family members is actually in the chat. Joe Stokes, section 200 members. We love that area. No, there was no kiss cam with me and Elliot, Mark. That was kind of the running gag a little bit off the bench. But anyways, moving on towards the Ravens offense. I already mentioned it before. Very dynamic with Lamar. They love to run the ball. Keaton Mitchell, an emerging star. He's really added some life to this run game where they can just burn you and burn you bad. I think he's had...
Yeah, Keaton Mitchell last week, just 3 carries. One of those carries went for a 40-yard touchdown. The John Harbaugh, Todd Monken's refusal to give him more touches seems to be what we talked about with Jahmyr Gibbs for the first few weeks. When these young scat backs show you that they have the ability to do it on a consistent basis with the ball in their hands, you have to give them the ball. They continued to run the ball with Gus Edwards, and he was just not getting the job done against the interior of that Browns defense. And Keaton Mitchell's speed on the outside is the exact kind of running back that scares the crap out of me against the Bengals defense. I just keep flashing back to the play Tajay Spears had weeks ago when we were playing in Tennessee, when he runs all the way to the left into a pack of Bengals defenders, only to reverse all the way back around to the right for a 30-yard gain. And that's the exact kind of back that Keaton Mitchell is, just blazing speed, the ability to make people miss in the open field. He was on IR to start the season, but these last couple of weeks since he's gotten into the rotation, he's been incredible when they've let him touch the ball. I was hoping that we were going to get through this Ravens game before he really emerged in their backfield, but that's not the case. I think he's going to get a lot of carries against us, and he's going to be a problem for our defense to contain. But the other thing about that Ravens rushing attack is Lamar. We talk about it on this program every time we talk about the Ravens. I don't think it's the great idea for them to keep running Lamar. And he led the team in rushing yards again, 8 carries on Sunday. And he's productive on the ground and he makes it happen. But what do we say about 8 carries? That's probably 8 hits. And that's just not something that's good for your quarterback to be doing. They need guys like Keaton Mitchell to have more than 3 carries to take that weight off their quarterback. I think once they decide to let Lamar throw the ball more and get more comfortable in the pocket, we'll see some of these passing struggles go by the wayside. But I think this Ravens rushing attack is definitely the main worry going into tomorrow night.
Yeah, the rushing totals, the carries for Lamar is a legitimate concern. I'm just gonna let you know in the chat right now, 92 carries, 481 yards on the season. So that's 92 times that he's probably been hit or, you know, scampered off, and maybe they've came down on a late hit or something that wasn't called. Whatever. 24 sacks as well. So, and that doesn't include quarterback hits or hurries, anything like that, to where it can possibly create an injury. It's just not a good position for Lamar to be in, to be carrying the ball this many times this season. I mean, he's second in carries this year, and he's only 30 behind Gus Edwards. Actually, 29 carries behind Gus Edwards. He's only 20 yards behind him in yards as well. I I don't like it. I don't like it. I think it's a problem. Keaton Mitchell, by the way, I know you touched on him. He has 12 carries this season. Okay, 12. Can you guess what his yard total is?
Oh, geez. I mean, I'm not entirely sure. I know he's a home run player though. He's had 2 long touchdowns already so far this year.
On 12 carries, he has 172 yards rushing.
And that's what I mean. What is the refusal to give him more touches? He had 4 touches yesterday, 3 on the ground, 1 through the air. The first run was a 40-yard touchdown, and then the one catch was almost a 40-yard catch right there in the low 30s. He's just been unbelievable with the ball in his hands, and they need more weapons. Much like I said about the Bengals offensive line, we thought it was going to be better this season because we poured so many resources into it in the offseason. Well, that's how Baltimore is right now with their receiving core. The receiving core just has not lived up to the expectation, and that's why we've seen Lamar Jackson run the ball so much. That's why we've seen Gus Edwards, Justice Hill, now Keaton Mitchell. They're trying to find some kind of spark in the rushing game because none of these receivers have been able to give them the production that they wanted when they drafted Zay Flowers in the first round, when they signed Odell Beckham Jr. Odell Beckham, 1 catch, 40 yards, and a touchdown this week. This is after Zay Flowers had just 1 catch last week. They cannot seem to spread the ball around. They like to find the hot hand and roll with it. And obviously that worked their last 2 weeks with blowout wins against the Lions and the Seahawks. But playing against the defense like the Browns, that didn't work. And they couldn't find a consistent offense through the air. Lamar, obviously, like we said, forced to run the ball so much, forced to run the ball with Gus Edwards, and it wasn't working. And I think that's been the biggest issue for this Ravens offense is just not finding consistent production out of the receiver room that they thought they fixed.
Yeah, and it, the one bright spot would be Zay Flowers, and he just can't do it all by himself. And Mark Andrews too. I really like Mark Andrews. I think it's an issue that will eventually sort itself out. I don't think it's all on the receivers. They had one really bad game. I was actually looking this up a while ago because Elliot brings it up all the time about that one Pittsburgh game where they had 8 drops. Well, they have 12 drops or 13 drops on the entire season. And, I mean, yes, they can't get open as much as you'd like. But in terms of units in the NFL that are poor, I would not put the receiver group up there because I think Zay Flowers really does boost this group up quite a bit. And Mark Andrews is Mark Andrews. I think Lamar just needs to learn to throw to those guys more often, give them more targets, and I think this offense will see a lot more growth. One thing that we have not touched on yet about the Ravens, this defense, and I don't really want to talk about it because I feel like this is going to be the key factor in this Bengals game. They look they have been pretty much on a historic pace up until this last week. They've looked really good up until the second half of the Browns game where they just I feel like they got complacent almost. Like it just seems like it happened so randomly and it was Deshaun completing 14 passes in a row. I don't know. It's very strange. I think the pass rush you have here, it's unbelievable. It has been unbelievable to the fact where I just don't see it continuing to be this effective. But it until otherwise, I don't think we should count that to. I think we should consider them very legit until they prove otherwise. I mean, they're up top in yards allowed, second, just right behind the Browns. They are the I think they lead the league in sacks, if I'm not mistaken. I think they lead the league in pressures. Roquan Smith, a beast. They're just a really good football team. Really well coached defense all around.
Yeah, the defense is phenomenal, and that's what John Harbaugh has built Baltimore into. It's a defensive organization, it's a defensive team, and they finally have their fearless leader now, Roquan Smith. And they seem to be trying to find that ever since the days of Ray Lewis and Ed Reed. They haven't had that stud that we came to expect in Baltimore. Well, now they do. With Roquan Smith, 21 tackles on Sunday. He is as elite comes. We talked about Fred Warner being such a great middle linebacker in a tier of his own. Well, with the season Roquan Smith is having this year, I think he's certainly entered that discussion for best off-ball middle linebacker. He has been unbelievable after the Ravens paid him a $20 million a year contract for an off-ball linebacker. That was laughed at for many days after that contract was signed, but he's lived up to every single dollar from that contract, and he's played out of his mind since taking over that defense, and he opens everybody else up. Patrick Queen has revived his career as the second middle linebacker there in Baltimore. And this pass rush really is where I get scared of this defense. Justin Madubuike in the middle has been incredible this year. 5.5 sacks, leading the team, tied with Jadeveon Clowney, and he's on the interior. And the Bengals, if we know anything so far this year, is that interior offensive line has really struggled. Since we signed Alex Kappa, he's been great. But these last couple of weeks, he's really struggled, played some of the worst games of his time with the Bengals. And he's playing one of the best interior. We're playing one of the best interior pass rushes that we've played in years with the Ravens this week. Cordell Volson has certainly had his struggles as well so far this season. I'm worried that this pass rush is really going to be able to get after Burrow on Sunday and make the job of the secondary a lot easier. Secondary's been playing very well. Their numbers are very good, but I still think that is a product of the pass rush. Marlon Humphrey, doubtful on Sunday or on Thursday night. Obviously, that's a huge injury. He's an all pro level corner, when he's at full strength, and they're going to be without him. But they've had guys just step up. Arthur Millette, Geno Stone have been great this year. Multiple picks for both of those guys, seemingly in the mix everywhere. Rookie Kyle Hamilton last year was great his rookie season, and now his second year, he's just taken another step, and he's been one of the best safeties in the league since this season started. And this Ravens defense, there's just not much else to say about them. They do everything right on all three levels, excluding one second half where Deshaun Watson looked like the Deshaun Watson that we saw in Houston for the first time of his Browns tenure, completing off 14 passes. They didn't look great, but other than that, for 9.5 games this year, this Ravens team has been unbelievable, and I think we're going to see more of it on Thursday. This is going to be an absolute dogfight, but you're giving me 4 points and the Cincinnati Bengals in a must-win game. I'll take the stripes, Casey.
Jacob, I'm going to have to agree with you. I'm also taking the Bengals +4. I just think it's going to be a close game regardless. Like, it's going to be a 3-point game, however which way you slice it, a field goal type match where maybe it's not 3 points, but you get my point. It's going to come down to that final field goal of the game, whether that's a 1 point, 2 point, or a 3-point game. And I like the Bengals' chances. I like the Bengals' chances a lot. One thing that we didn't really touch on that I will talk about a little bit is what the Bengals offensively can do against the defense for the Ravens. And just in terms of just what they can do moving forward, I really think that the Bengals need to establish some sort of run threat. They need to be more efficient running the ball. I don't know how they do that, but when they do that, I think being able to run a lot of play action and roll out can really help give Burrow time. The perfect example of this, I mean, it just happened just this last week and it was shoved in my face to the point where I was like, oh, yeah, that is one part of our game that is severely lacking. The fact that CJ Stroud had so much time that he was able to roll out of his pocket on play actions and be able to outrun our defensive line, be able to find the open guy. That's just something the Joe Burrow has never been able to have, never been able to do. He can run play action. He's been one of the better play action quarterbacks in the league when he's able to. I think they need to do a little more. I don't know how they get that done. I don't know how they become more efficient overnight. It's a tall task, but I think that doing so allows them to open up their playbook in many different ways because of that one threat of run, of play action, or even just three-step dropbacks under gun or under center. That that quick slants. There's still quick game that you can have from under center. You can still run stuff out of shotgun too. I would just like for them to be a little bit more balanced.
Yeah, and that's the gripe we've had with Zach Taylor calling this offense. It seems like since he took over play calling duties, he's just not balanced enough. He doesn't use the under center. He doesn't use the play action. He doesn't get creative in the run game. And I think part of that issue is that we do just have one running back. We talk about Lamar Jackson being the second rusher on the Ravens. Well, Joe Burrow is the second leading rusher on the Bengals. And they're certainly not equivalent in when it comes to the rushing attack that they give an offense. So that's not even comparable at all. I think the way the Bengals handled their offseason with the running back position is borderline unforgivable. I know obviously you would like to see a little bit more production out of Chase Brown. I know they gave Samaje Perine a competitive contract offer with what he got from Denver, but to go into the season with no true running back two, it seems unacceptable to me. And Joe Mixon's getting every single carry, expected to get every single yard. It's just not a sustainable model. And usually at this point in the season, there's nothing you can do to fix that. But last night, inexplicably, the Jets cut Michael Carter, a beloved locker room guy in New York, a pretty productive running back in his time in the league. I know he's still on waivers, at least when we started the show tonight, Casey. I would love the Bengals to go out and find a way to put in a claim, maybe get him if that's possible.
I do think he was picked up by the Cardinals. The Cardinals
He's
with
a
the
great
number
player.
one waiver wire. Yeah, I was really.
I think he's going to be great wherever he ends up. That was a name. It would have been a godsend for the Bengals to fix the backfield in the middle of the season. Like I said, that is just not something that happens. A guy that you're willing to give meaningful carries coming free in the middle of the season. Yeah, Joe Stokes says Carter was claimed. Unfortunately, I must have missed that before the show started. That is unfortunate. It's exactly what the Bengals would have needed.
Yeah, it says here Arizona was not alone. Tampa Bay and Washington also attempted to claim Michael Carter. From Ian Rappaport, I don't think that the Bengals had a priority anyways, but the fact that their name wasn't mentioned on this makes me a little peeved, just a little. There's just no reason why Joe Burrow should be second in rushing, and I know that if you were probably to ask Zach Taylor, he would probably say something to the regards of, well, we run a lot of screens, bubble screens to our receivers. That's kind of the extension of the run game. Yeah, whatever. You got to have another guy. If Joe Mixon were to go down, we would be absolutely screwed in the run game. Simple as that. Now, usually what we like to do with Thursday night is we like to give out some prop bets. Jacob, what are your favorite prop bets of the night?
The first one is just plug your nose as a Bengals fan and press send because Keaton Mitchell's rushing yardage total at 36.5 is just far too low. Like I said, he's the kind of running back that really scares me against this Bengals defense. Shifty in space, has really true breakaway speed. And at 36.5 yards, that's just one touch. He got that on his lone reception last week, and he also got that on his touchdown run. So if he just gets one touch and breaks free, you could cash that over 36.5 yardage ticket right there. I think that's a pretty easy bet for me, Casey.
Yeah, I really like that one too. Um, I'm gonna go for my first one. I'm going with Mark Andrews receptions. It's currently sitting at 4.5. The Bengals love to give receptions to tight ends. They don't give a lot of yards up, but they give a lot of receptions up to tight ends. So Mark Andrews at 4.5 plus plus 100. That's even money. I'll take that as one of my first props of the night.
Tight ends have been the bane of the Bengals' existence almost my whole life. So that's definitely a good bet, especially with one as good as Mark Andrews. The guy that's picked up a lot of slack with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase banged up over the last couple of weeks is Tyler Boyd. I know he had a big drop in the end zone, but he had a great game against the Texans, really playing as the number one receiver. And he had a great game the week before. So over 41 and a half receiving yards for Tyler Boyd with T. Higgins out, with Jamar Chase still banged up, still nursing that back injury. I love that line, 41 and a half. I think after this last week with Tyler Boyd, the unfortunate drop after a great game, I think they're going to look to get him the ball early and often. I also love Tyler Boyd, plus 250 to score a touchdown anytime. And if you want to get spicy, 1,400 to score first. I think Tyler Boyd probably gets into the end zone tomorrow night.
My last pick of the night, I have Zay Flowers over 50 yards receiving. That's probably, I don't think that's his exact line on Betfred. That could be an alternate line, but I do believe it is minus 110 or 115. Regardless, I'm going to take whatever it is because 50 seems a little low. You look at the game that he had against the Bengals. He had a really big bomb that helped him out a lot. But past that, he's hit that 50-yard mark 7 out of the 9 games he's played in. I'll take the 50 yards over.
The last one I have for you guys tonight is Lamar Jackson over 8.5 carries. Now, that line is a little bit high. I'm not jumping on it quite yet. Maybe you can get it down to 7.5. But like we say every time we're talking about the Ravens, the amount Lamar Jackson is running the ball is absolutely absurd in that offense. And they don't look like they're going to stop. So until they stop, I think it's a safe bet to bet on Lamar over 8.5 carries, especially in a game that's so crucial to win for them. I think he's going to be using his legs quite a bit.
Good stuff. I think that does it for today's show. Jacob, do you have any closing thoughts before we wrap it up?
Nope, I'm good to go, Casey. That sounds good. I know we're all worried about the Bengals tomorrow night, so hopefully we're back talking about a win a week from today.
Yeah, I sure hope so too. I just want to say a quick thank you to Sean Connor, Joe Stokes, Mark Fetters, Javante Cole, Lure Up, Excalibur Iron Force, Jack Butler, Alex Coter. You guys are awesome. Thank you for watching the show. I want to just see if I missed anyone else. I don't think I missed anyone else. Last play I know was earlier in on the show. We appreciate all your guys' support. I do appreciate it quite a bit. Derby Storm, Yash, thank you guys for being in earlier on the day. Thanks for leaving a like. We really appreciate it. I've been Mac.
And I've been JT.
And we'll catch you guys next week.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody.